Hi, welcome to RWN Talks. My name's Iman from the RWN team, and today I'm joined by Kostas. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, man. Glad to be here. My name is Konstantinos Stergiopoulos. I'm the head of group security for Nestlé. In my role, I'm overseeing our security operations and security crisis preparedness. And my primary objective is to build organizational resilience within the company through rigorous testings. I view these elements of preparedness as key for key investments for a company such as Nestlé.
Amazing, thank you. I look forward to this conversation.
Looking forward.
As Chief Security Officer at Nestlé, overseeing a global supply chain, how have you seen the security landscape evolve?
Look, when I look at how the security landscape has evolved across Nestlé's global supply chain, the shift has been profound. Security has moved from a largely protective function to a strategic enabler of resilience and continuity. So today, in the environment that we operate, disruptions are driven as much as by climate volatility, by geopolitical tensions, by human rights expectations, as well as by traditional security concerns. That means security works hand in hand with the business to provide real-time risk intelligence, anticipate disruptions, and help ensure responsible sourcing without compromising continuity. In production, in distribution, the focus has expanded beyond guarding facilities. Factories are interconnected, more digital. So cyber and physical risks are convergence. And at the same time, climate events, instability of energy and social unrest are more frequent events. So security's role has evolved. It's not only about safeguarding people, protecting food safety and quality, but more critical about ensuring that the rapid response so operations can continue even under stress.
So, with the increasing geopolitical environmental disruptions that you were speaking about, how do you end up building resilience into such a complex and geographically spread supply chain?
Good question. Again, building resilience in a global, highly complex supply chain such as our company has starts with accepting one reality. One reality is disruptions are not exceptions. So our approach is based on anticipation, diversification, rapid recovery, rather than attempting to eliminate risk. So firstly, we invest heavily in foresight and intelligence. We use real-time geopolitical, environmental, operational risk monitoring, so we can easily identify the early warning signs, whether it's political instability in a sourcing region or climate stress affecting yields or congestion in critical logistics corridors, the recent one you are familiar with. So this allows us to move from the reactive crisis management more to proactive threat anticipation and decision making. Second, we design resilience into the supply chain itself. This means avoiding the single points of failure by diversifying sourcing regions and suppliers where possible, building redundancies for critical raw materials and manufacturing capabilities, balancing strategic buffers and the efficiency of them rather than optimizing for cost alone. So resilience is a design choice, not an emergency response. This is how we see resilience. And again, we integrate security risk management into business decision. We are working closely with functions such as procurement, operations, sustainability, so that risk considerations are factored into sourcing strategies and capital investments, market expansion. Should we go there? Should we go in that market, and so on? And last but not least is about preparedness and response capabilities. So it's about clear crisis governance and defined decision rights, regularly tested scenarios, primarily at site level. So, and when disruption occurs, speed and clarity matter more than perfect information, which you never have at the end of the day. And lastly, it's about people, it's about culture, which is very critical in my view. A resilient supply chain relies a lot on empowered local teams who understand risk, who can escalate quickly, and they have clear frameworks to work. So this is in a nutshell, what resilience for a global company like Nestle is. It's not about predicting every disruption, but be prepared, building those muscles that the organization needs and the visibility to absorb shocks, recover quickly, and continue servicing customers in a responsible way.
So then, when it comes to protecting your operations, your people, ensuring your continuity, in your experience, where do the large organizations tend to underestimate these risks?
Oh, great question, Iman. I think, again, my critical assumption is that large organizations most often are underestimating risk in areas that are sitting between functions rather than within the function. So big companies sometimes underestimate interdependencies. Individual risks such as geopolitical risks, cyber risks, climate risk, logistics risks are usually well understood, but in isolation within a function that manages those risks. So what's often is missed is how quickly a small disruption in one area can cascade across the organization, production, sourcing, IT, distribution. So sometimes organizations plan for known risks, but not enough for these systemic failures across functions. Secondly, sometimes I see that there is a tendency to overestimate the robustness which has been created by past successes. So there are times where there are long periods without any disruption. And sometimes this creates this false sense of security. Processes that have worked for years maybe not be resilient today against the speed, the complexity, the volatility, and the uncertainty, particularly in globally optimized supply chains, which are built for efficiency rather than shock absorption. And sometimes I see that big companies overestimate the third-party risks, even fourth-party risks. Companies, they have strong controls, internal controls, but the operations of companies are increasingly depending on suppliers, third-party suppliers, sometimes fourth-party suppliers, logistics providers, contract manufacturers, other digital partners. So a disruption, such as a cyber incident in a third-party supplier or an internal failure there, is impacting the big company. So this is, in my view, where organizations are underestimate their capabilities and the skills and they see, from time to time I see that they view resilience as a compliance or assurance issue rather than the operational reality. And the most resilient organizations are those that continuously test the assumptions, challenge the single point of failure, and treat resilience as a leadership discipline, not as a technical function, not as another function.
Really well said. Yeah, absolutely. So then, when it comes to security and resilience at its core being about ensuring continuity and enabling growth, I suppose, in many ways, how do you make sure that it's supporting the business and isn't, acting as a barrier in some situations?
Struggling with this question, business drives security and not the other way around. This is my motto. This is my favorite motto. And I'm always trying to persuade my team and convince that security support the business when it starts with the business. It starts with the strategy of the business, with growth priorities, with a risk appetite. It doesn't start with the controls that we put in place. And the first step, how I see this, the first step is positioning security as a business partner in value creation and value preservation, not as a gatekeeper. That means understanding how the company creates value, where growth depends on speed, flexibility, and what level of risk the company is prepared to accept. When security frame its role in terms of enabling those objectives rather than simply preventing, this changes the conversation sometimes with leadership. Second, we are translating security risks into business impact. It's not about security risks, it's about the impact to the business, the impact to our people. Instead of talking about threats or vulnerabilities in isolation, we focus on what does it mean for continuity, for revenue, for trust of the brand, for perhaps regulatory exposures and safety of our people. And when leaders, they can clearly see how risks affect the operations or the strategy of the company, then security becomes as a decision support function, not as a blocker. And then the next point is how we as security leaders, we are embedding security as early as possible, not late. I call this security by design. Security works alongside with procurement, supply chain, IT operations, and from the design phase, whether that's a new sourcing model, a new factory investment, or a market expansion. Should we go into this country? So early involvement of security allows us to propose practical and proportionate controls that preserve momentum instead of slowing it down later. And most important thing is risk-based, pragmatic approach. Not everything needs the same level of protection. By focusing the resources on what is truly critical, people, safety, business continuity, trust, we avoid this over-engineering and unnecessary friction at some point in time. And last but not least, in my view, is transparency and credibility. These are two elements that matter most. Security leaders earn trust by being solutions-oriented, decisive in crisis, and transparent about trade-offs. So when the business sees that security helps the business to navigate uncertainty, recover faster, and make better decisions under pressure, they see security naturally as an enabler of growth rather than as a gatekeeper or blocker. So in short, security enables continuity and growth when it helps an organization move forward with confidence by managing risks intelligently, not try to eliminate it, but managing this.
Security by design. I like that. I'm going to be using that. Thank you very much. These are great insights. I wonder, in today's world where risks are cutting across industries and borders, how important it is for leaders to share similar insights with each other, to share their security by design, practical approaches to resilience with each other.
International problems requires international solutions. So for me, it's critically important that leaders come together, such as the summit event. They come together to share practical approaches to resilience. So the risk we face today, they don't respect borders. They don't respect industries or organizational boundaries. We talk about geopolitical instability, climate impact, cyber threats, supply chain disruptions. These are systemic risks by nature, and there is no company or sector or country that can build resilience in isolation. And what leaders are gaining from coming together is this pattern recognition, practical insights, what actually works under pressure, what failed, and why. And this exchanging that we have among leaders move resilience out of this theory. And we use more and more the word resilience now. it moves resilience out of the theory and into operational reality. And they help shorten the learning cycles so organizations can adapt faster than the risk environment involves. There is also a strong collective defense element, I would say, whether it's cargo crime or cyber incidents or regional instability in places. You see that by sharing awareness among leaders improves the early warning and preparedness across the entire ecosystems of companies. And when one organization, one company learns early, many others can avoid or reduce their impact. So just as important is alignment of expectations when companies and governments are critical partners, share approaches to preparedness and response. This creates common standards that reduce friction during crisis, especially when time, clarity, and trust are very, very essential. And this collaboration among leaders in resilience, it reinforces this crucial mindset shift. I mean, resilience is not a competitive disadvantage. In many cases, it's a shared responsibility for long-term growth, not only for companies, but also for societies. So, in a nutshell, resilience today is not built by seeing the stronger organization in the room, but by seeing part of the most connected and informed ones.
These are brilliant things to think about. Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing more insights at the Resilience World Nexus Summit in October.
Thank you, Iman. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really hope you enjoyed the insights. If you'd like to hear more about risk and resilience, please stay up to date via our social media or have a look at the website, where we'd love for you to register your interest to join us at the Resilience World Nexus Summit this October. See you there.